Welcome back, everyone. Oz here, and today I've got some r/stories about Kevin for you all. As per usual, I'll be reading you the posts, giving you my opinions, and I hope you do the same down in the comments below. And without further ado, let's jump right into it. Once upon a time on an Ask Reddit thread 11 years ago, user Noah the Red commented on the post for the question of who's the dumbest person you've ever met. This person was named Kevin. And this comment would define the subreddit Stories About Kevin. And here is that comment. It's not uncommon for a teacher to have students who are a bit behind the curve in certain aspects, but 99.99999% of the time, they are keen on something. They might not understand how to identify a noun or what the theme is, but they know somehow how to make a mean plate of nachos. You learn pretty quick to not judge a fish for their tree climbing ability, you know? I thought this was the rule when I was teaching, until I met Kevin. Kevin isn't his real name, but it doesn't matter because he can't spell it anyway. Kevin was a student of mine during my last year of teaching. He came to my classroom with very little to show for his academic past. He had moved a few times and thus was missing a lot of typical test scores that we use to try and ballpark their ability. Don't worry, it was a ballpark. We didn't make major decisions until we actually had a chance to talk and work with a student for a bit. I thought, that's fine, I'll just do some one-on-one with Kevin and see what's up. One-on-one with Kevin was like conversing with someone who'd forgotten everything in a freak, if not impossible, amnesia incident. There was no evidence that he had learned anything past the 2nd grade. And now, he was in 9th grade. Flabbergasted, I figured we need to get more serious with this. If he was going to be in my class, I needed to know why and how. I decided to meet with him, his guidance counselor, his parents, and another teacher to see what was really going on. This is where it all became clear. It was by some incredible fluke that his family hadn't been wiped off the face of the earth years ago. Odds are his entire heritage was based on blind luck and some type of sick divine intervention that saves his family every time a threat presents itself. Kevin was the genetic pinnacle of this null achievement. Even my instructional lead, a woman who could find a redeeming trait in a Balrog, failed to see any reason this kid or his family should be alive today. So here's a list of events that made it abundantly clear that God exists and he's laughing uncontrollably. Kevin frequently forgot when and where class was. On more than one occasion, I had to retrieve him from other classrooms. Kevin ate an entire 24-pack of crayons, puked, and then did it again the next day. This is 9th grade. I have no idea where he got crayons. Kevin's dad wrote tuition checks and mailed them to me, his English teacher. This was a public school. When I gave it back to Kevin, voided to give to his dad with a brief note explaining that this is a public school, Kevin got in trouble for trying to spend it at a 7-Eleven after school. Kevin was removed from the culinary arts program after leaving a cutting board on the gas stove and starting a fire. Twice. Kevin threw his lunch at the school resource officer and tried to run away. He ran into a door and insisted it wasn't him. Kevin stole my phone during class. I called it. It rang. He denied that it was ringing. Not that it wasn't his. Not that he did it. No. He denied that the phone was actually ringing. He tried it 3 times before the end of the year. Kevin called the basketball coach a motherfucking bitch during gym. Basketball tryouts were that afternoon. Kevin tried out. It didn't go well. Kevin's mom could never remember which school he went to. She missed several meetings because she drove to other schools, none of which he ever went to. Kevin tased himself in the neck before a football game. Kevin kept a bottle of orange Kool-Aid in his backpack for about 4 months. He thought it would turn into alcohol. He drank it during homeroom and threw up. Kevin said the N-word a lot. Kevin was white. The school was 84% black. Kevin got beat up a lot. Kevin stole another student's iPhone and tried to sell it back to them. Kevin didn't understand that his grade was dependent on tests, quizzes, homework, classwork, and participation. Kevin finished his first semester with a 3% average. He tried to bribe me with $11. Kevin spit on a girl and said, "You should get out of those wet clothes." The girl was the Spanish student teacher. Kevin didn't know dogs and cats were different animals. Kevin tried to download porn onto a computer in the library at the circulation desk. While he was logged on, Kevin asked a girl to prom. He was in 9th grade and freshmen don't go to prom. By asking for her number and then texting her his address. Kevin got gum in his hair constantly. Kevin regularly tried to cheat on assignments by knocking the pile over, grabbing one before I had picked them all up, and then writing his name on it wherever there was room. Kevin had several allergies, but neither of his parents nor he could remember what they were. They were very concerned that the holiday party, it's high school, we don't have those, would have peanuts. When they finally got a doctor's note, he was allergic to amoxicillin. Kevin and his parents took a trip to Nassau. How the fuck did they even get airline tickets? And forgot all their luggage at home. I didn't believe him when he told me until I talked to his mom, who told me first thing when I saw her at the bi-weekly meeting. Kevin's grandfather apparently died in a chainsaw accident. I can only assume God was looking the other way that day. And that, my dear audience, is the origin of Kevin. And there is an entire subreddit dedicated to people who have Kevin tendencies. I figured that this would be a nice breath of fresh air and something to kind of be a bit of a palate cleanser episode in between the ones of constant serious topics that we have. So, enjoy the laughs, enjoy the fun, and we'll be back to our regularly scheduled Hellfest tomorrow. Kindly Leopard 2300. Kevin tried to heat up soup in a Ziploc bag on a stove. Kevin once brought soup for lunch. Not in a container, not in a thermos. Nope. He brought it in a Ziploc bag. A floppy, sad, cold bag of soup. At lunchtime, he asked where the microwave was. We said it was broken. Kevin went, "Oh, okay, I'll just heat it up on the stove." We assumed he'd pour it into a pot like a normal person. Oh, we were so wrong. He literally plopped the Ziploc bag directly onto the burner. Gas stove. Open flame. We noticed the smell of burning plastic before we saw the flames. Kevin stood there poking the bag with a spoon like, I don't get it. It worked when I did it in the fireplace that one time. It melted. Soup and plastic everywhere. The break room smelled like a chemical spill for 2 days. Kevin blamed the bag. They should make them more heat resistant. It's false advertising. He brought raw eggs in a mug the next day and asked if the toaster could scramble them. I still think about that. I always enjoy the headcanon that the stories about Kevin is just one person named Kevin who's just an absolute fucking menace to society. But the next factor is, and this is the one that scares me the most, is would it be worse if Kevin lived, if this Kevin specifically, lived on his own or lived with a person? Because on one hand, if he's living on his own, the chances for catastrophe is just exponential, and you know that, like, every single day that he exists, there is definitely a fire risk. Like, this man is one of the reasons why we have warnings on things like shampoo and conditioner. But the other half of this is, would it be worse if he lived with someone? Because then he's putting someone else at risk towards his weird shenanigans, but there's also the factor that they might be able to prevent his weird shenanigans. Also, for those of you wondering why the plastic bag worked above an open flame, is because it wasn't just sitting on the burner, and all the parts of the plastic that were in contact with the flame were also in contact with a cool liquid that was able to cool it back down to a temperature where it wouldn't melt. However, if you just drop the sad, floppy, cold plastic bag onto the burner, well, there are parts of that that were probably, not quite shielded from the heating elements and eventually caused them to burn and break open and make the mess that they probably saw. In other words, if you're going to cook soup in a plastic bag, elevate it above the flame. So that way the cold soup can cool down the plastic bag that will inevitably melt if you're not careful. But also, just in general, don't do that. Not only from the fire hazard, but also microplastics. Wolf instincts. There was an actual Kevin that worked at my last job, a deli. Yes, his name was really Kevin. Kevin did almost no work. He spent most of his time talking to random customers, playing on his Switch, or doing who knows what. Summoning Satan for all we know. In the few months I worked there, Kevin would make the most low-effort sandwich rolls imaginable despite making them a billion times. Didn't go a single day without telling me of his latest get-rich-quick schizophrenia scheme that usually involves stealing from some random celebrity. Was convinced he could get with Taylor Swift and would refuse to stop talking about it in disturbing detail. Hit on customers who were way too young for him. Paid me $20 for literally no reason. Would randomly play Legend of Zelda in the middle of a shift. Took all day to do a single task that would take anyone else 15 minutes. Swore he was secretly a genius and was just hiding it. Just disappeared one day and nobody knows where he went. Kevin was in his 60s and had gray hair. I mean, you got $20 from him. That's something. Also, him being in his 60s definitely adds new context to the Taylor Swift comments and him hitting on customers that were too young for him, and also his get-rich-quick schemes. Ligamentary. Our new intern is a Kevin, and the only reason we haven't fired him is to keep collecting stories. My husband owns a small plumbing business that primarily does labor, but also runs a small retail storefront with parts and basic appliances, etc. Every so often, he'll participate in a job readiness program with the local high school where you take on a student intern for a semester. They get credit and experience in the working world. You get free labor and some positive community exposure. Usually the kids are great, sometimes better than the paid employees, but this semester, he got Kevin. A brief sampling of Kevin's misadventures in the 4 hours a week he spends clerking in my husband's storefront. One of his biggest jobs is to answer the phone. On his first day, he was introduced to pick up and say, "Custom quality plumbing, don't forget to ask about our seasonal maintenance deal specials. How can we help you today?" Instead, he was answering the business phone. "Kevin residence, who's calling, please?" When confronted, he explained he forgot the greeting, and this is how his mother had taught him to answer phones. On his first day of work, my husband did the standard welcome he does for all new employees. He brought in donuts and gathered everyone around to meet the new guy. When asked to say a few words about himself, he said I chose this job because all the good ones were taken. And when asked what he knows about plumbing, he told a detailed story of a toilet clogging dump he took a few months ago. One day, he was asked to clean the break room kitchen. Someone had happened to bring in bagels. He threw out all the poppy seed bagels because they had mold on them. My husband took him to a job site once to get a feel for interacting with customers and basic repairs. Kevin asked the client if he could take home a framed photo of the client's take home a framed photo of the client's teenage daughter hanging in the living room. For the first Oh my god, I couldn't keep it together. For the first couple weeks, Kevin kept stealing lunches from the break room, then denying he had done it when the other employees called him on it. It's a small business and obvious when someone has your food. Then trying to pay them to give him their lunch. The first day he brought his own lunch, he brought a pound of raw chuck and complained of an unsuitable work environment when my husband informed him there was nowhere for him to grill it at the store. He ate it raw. He got sick and had to go to the hospital. The company was hosting a holiday coat drive and asked Kevin to type up the flyer. Understanding his limits by this point, they just instructed him to alter the date on the previous year's flyer. He managed to mess that up even still, and didn't notice until he had printed 250 full-color copies of the flyer. He thought if he threw the flyer out, no one would know, but he threw it out in the main office trash can. Kevin's definitely never so much as seen drugs in his life, but he's always talking like he's an original gangster. He approached a large tattooed African-American employee at the business, who was actually a church pastor, an addiction counselor, and a volunteer sheriff, and tried to buy drugs from him. To impress a girl, Kevin volunteered to watch her dogs while working. I don't know the circumstances of why she asked a stranger to watch her dogs, but after about 15 minutes, Kevin got tired of waiting for her and let the dogs loose. She came back looking for him, and he pretended as though he'd never met her. Edit, my husband says Kevin walked out of work to chat her up, and she asked him to watch them while she went into a no dogs allowed store. So he knew where she was when he let them go, but he also says she got them back. Kevin had a decent amount of money saved from birthdays and Christmases. He often liked to flex on the other employees that he didn't need to work. He was just doing this for school. He had all the money he'd ever need. But turns out he didn't even have it anymore because he lost all of it going along on GameStop at the height of the frenzy. He's irate that he could not sell his stock back at the original price, and still on some level, believes he was scammed. He has aspirations to be a famous TikToker, so would always be setting up these asinine pranks, like trying to bust in on people while using the toilet, rigging heavy objects to fall on people, or yelling "fire" when there is no fire. That was what my husband and the others in charge meant to discuss cutting him, but decided the entertainment value of his Kevinness was worth sticking it through to the end of the semester. It all made sense when we met Kevin's mother. Kevina recently came in and confronted my husband as to why Kevin wasn't being paid for his work. He explained that it was a 4-credit program through the high school, thinking Kevin might have intentionally misled his mother. But no matter how he explained it, she didn't get it and kept insisting we pay Kevin, and kept talking about points on the back end as well. Kevina knocked over an entire display on her way in and didn't even acknowledge it, try to clean it, or offer to pay for what was broken. In fact, she charged right ahead with making her original demands. Kevin's dad is not in the picture, and he's been calling my husband and a couple of the other guys at the work dads semi-jokingly. When Kevina came in, after making her demands for payment, she asked my husband how he plans to stay in Kevin's life if this is really only a semester. Kevin turned 18 last month. He celebrated by getting a Calvin pissing tattoo over his left pec, with his nipples serving as the penis. We know because he showed an infection on the site to a young family who'd come in to buy an L-pipe. I'll ask my husband if there's anything else I'm missing, but that's the crux of the Kevin, the junior plumber for you. I still can't get over the idea of having a photo of your daughter hung up and a plumber and his young intern come through and he asks you, "Hey, can I take home that framed photo of your daughter?" I'm not sure why, but I think just the absolute absurdity of that question just hits me at the very core. Icy Television 8823. Kevin thought he was being responsible with money. It did not go how he planned. So, my friend Kevin, yep, he's exactly the type, has been trying to get his life together this year. Nothing dramatic though. He just started a new job, moved out, and decided he wants to be more adult. His words. Anyway, last week he comes over and tells us he's been working on his credit. Cool. Normal. Good for him. Then he says, "I think I messed something up, but I'm not sure." Which, if you know Kevin, means something definitely went wrong. He explains that he set every single bill he has to autopay, without checking dates, balances, or anything. He literally turned on autopay for rent, utilities, his phone, his credit card, everything. He just assumed automation equals problem solved. Except all the payments hit the same day, and Kevin did not have that kind of money sitting in his account. His bank rejected half the payments, including one for his credit card. He gets a notice about a missed payment, panics, and I swear, calls the bank asking if they could unmiss it, because it was an accident. They obviously tell him no. So he's freaking out, thinking he tanked his credit score. He goes, "I don't even use credit cards anymore. I'm being responsible. I've been putting everything on my debit card." I ask him which debit card. He shrugs and goes, "The blue one? The one that says something about credit on the app. I think it builds credit." Maybe. He has no idea. He didn't even read the app. He thought missed payments didn't count if it wasn't on purpose. He literally said they should have a button for that. We helped him fix the autopay stuff and explain the basics, but man, Kevin is like one small decision away from accidentally buying a house or something. So it took me a little bit to be able to do this, and it definitely took a lot of just managing finances and buckling down. But the way that I have it is all of my bills are paid 1 month in advance right now. My goal is to get 6 months in advance, but that is going to take a lot. But by having it 1 month in advance, I get to choose when the payments happen. And for me, they happen as YouTube pays out. So that way, YouTube money comes in, all my bills charge, and bada booey, everything's handled and I have no stresses to worry about. But in order to do that though, and make sure there were no late payments on the table, I had to ensure that everything was paid a month in advance. And while some services, they do have a 30-day grace period where I could just continue to do that, I enjoy having the safety of it, so just in case if something does happen where YouTube just didn't make enough that month to pay off my bills, then I at least still have 1 month ahead of schedule, and next month I can just get right back on track, assuming things continue to go well. That's at least just what I'm currently trying to do, to manage my finances and to be smarter with things and not fall behind and deal with financial stress, because Not knowing how you're gonna pay next month's set of bills is a stress that I wouldn't wish upon anyone. Amazing excuse 3860. Kevina steals the one thing that everyone will notice is missing. I work at a plasma donation center. I'm gonna preface this post with two things. One, I know that selling your plasma for money is a shady as fuck business practice. Believe me, I tried to get jobs elsewhere. This was the only place with relevant experience that would hire me. In this job market, you take what you can get. Two, I'm well aware of the fact that most plasma donors are poor and desperate and that some of them have addictions. That doesn't make actions like this okay, nor does it excuse the fact that this particular stunt was one of the most profoundly stupid that I have ever heard of. Kevina was a donor who had been deferred multiple times for the same issue. I can't say what the issue is for privacy reasons, but I can say that donors can only be deferred for this issue a certain number of times before management steps in and says, okay, you need to take a long break from donating before you can come back. That's exactly what management told her on this fateful day. She had this issue happen one too many times and thus could not donate for a whole month. Kevina did not like this, and as soon as the manager left, Kevina decided that if she couldn't get $100 a week the easy way, she'd have to get money the hard way, by stealing. Now, there are quite a few things that someone could steal from a plasma center without anyone batting an eye. A walkie-talkie, a needle, a bottle, a bowl. Hell, she probably could have taken a phone left in the lost and found and nobody would have noticed or cared. But I guess those weren't worth enough money to Kevina. Kevina's genius plan was to go down the hallway, which is towards the direction of the bathrooms, take the AED, a defibrillator, in the hallway right out of the case and then walk out the back door. Her first mistake was that this was the center's only AED, and it was in a hallway frequently used by nurses, staff, and donors. There was zero chance that nobody would notice it had gone missing. How she managed to take it without anyone seeing her do it is honestly a miracle. Not only is it required for plasma donation centers to have at least one AED, but it's a necessary device because heart attacks are a real risk of donating plasma. It's extremely rare for anyone to have a heart attack as a result of donating, but it is possible. So she stole a piece of equipment that was both required by law and necessary for the safety of everyone who entered the center. Of course, it didn't take long for people to notice it had gone missing, and it took no time at all for the security cameras to figure out who had stolen it, especially because we have her face, her name, her social security number, her biometric data, and her last known address. All management had to do was find who was in the center at the time of the theft and match the face of the theft to the right donor in our systems. But that's not all the cameras caught. See, the cameras also caught which direction she was headed when she left, and she was headed straight towards the pawn shop across the street. Now, a smart criminal wouldn't have stolen an important piece of medical equipment in an area frequented by hundreds of people on a daily basis, directly in the line of sight of security cameras. But you'd at least think that anyone with half a brain would at least, I don't know, try to sell the stolen item online and not go to the pawn shop directly across the street from the scene of the crime? So Kevina took the AED to the pawn shop and tried to sell it. The pawn shop, of course, rightfully assumed that she did not obtain a mint condition, unopened, and unused AED legally, because normally, people do not just casually have medical equipment that costs thousands of dollars lying around. Even if they did obtain one legitimately, if they were to sell it, it would obviously not be unopened and in mint condition by the time they decided to sell it. It was the pawn shop that called the police non-emergency line. They also called the center to inform us of what went down with the suspect. Unfortunately, this is where my tale ends as the details get a bit sparse. I have no idea what happened to Kevina after the pawn shop confronted her. I assume that she fled the scene and is still on the run. I have no idea if the AED was taken from the pawn shop by the police as evidence or if the police found her and took it off her. It took about 2 days for my center to replace the AED. I assume that they bought a new one since I would assume the original AED would be used as evidence in court or something. 2 agonizing days of all of us staff wondering in the back of our minds if this would finally be the day somebody actually had a heart attack, and we would be helpless to do anything except CPR and call an ambulance. Thankfully, nobody did, but I can't help but to think, How fucked up is it that somebody could have died all because one person was dumb enough and desperate enough to steal life-saving medical equipment because she couldn't sell a part of her body for money? So here's a question here. Obviously this plasma center is pretty shady because they're operating illegally for 2 days without an AED. But what would happen if there was a heart attack on site and they didn't have the AED because it was stolen? Let's say in this hypothetical, the person dies on the scene because help couldn't arrive fast enough and CPR wasn't effective. How many of the parties would be liable? Would Kevina, having stole the AED, be kind of in the position of having involuntary manslaughter be tacked on? I only ask because recently I watched the felony murder piece from John Oliver, and I'm wondering if that would be an instance where that could be applied here. Not necessarily felony murder, but like a similar legal loophole / process of charging them with felony manslaughter because they stole the device that would have otherwise prevented that person from dying. Then of course there's the fact that the plasma center operated illegally for 2 days knowing they didn't have the proper equipment on site. So would they also be liable in that case? I would assume so, I just wonder where the liability would fall towards. I know that's probably not the tangent that you guys were wanting or hoping for, but it's a genuine question that I'm really curious about here. Purple Birdie Lady 623. A guy who feigned being shocked that I couldn't sell alcohol without an ID. Hey y'all, I got another story for you from the convenience store I work at. This time it wasn't about the same Kevin from my last couple of stories. This was a different Kevin. If the subreddit's popular enough, I might actually look into covering these ones. But additionally, it makes sense that someone working at a convenience store would have an abundance of stories about Kevin archetypes wandering through. I first saw this Kevin about a week ago. He came in with whom I'd assume was his girlfriend. The girlfriend asked me to check the back to see if we had any Celsius energy drinks while he went to the beer cooler. I went to the back to check. Unfortunately, we didn't have any, and I went to the girl and let her know as such. I saw out the corner of my eye the guy with a couple 12-packs of Twisted Teas walking right out the door. The girl left shortly after that. I think the girl was a distraction so the guy could get away with the theft. They managed to get me that time, but not tonight. The girl and guy came in. The guy went to the beer cooler and the girl walked up to the counter to ask me to check the back for Celsius drinks. I don't think they recognized me, but I certainly recognized them. I told the girl to leave. She left right as the guy came out of the beer cooler and was walking towards the exit with a couple packs of Twisted Teas. I told him I'd take care of him at the counter, and he reluctantly followed me to it. I asked for an ID, and he told me he didn't have it. I told him I couldn't sell it without an ID, but he kept trying to convince me to sell to him. I wouldn't budge on this. Not only is it store policy, but it's also the law. I obviously refused the sale. He tried to grab one of the packs and claimed he was going to put them away from me. Yeah, like I'd fall for that. I told him I'd take care of it, and he reluctantly left. So in the comments, the main consensus is that Kevins are usually supposed to be clueless, and this guy very much wasn't clueless. They had an organized system in place, they got away with it once, they tried to do it again. Also, maybe it's just because I'm one hell of a paranoid motherfucker who also played a lot of Bethesda RPGs growing up, but the moment that someone asks if I can check something in the back while I'm alone on staff, I'm not going back there. I know they're gonna try to steal from me. You're not getting your paws on my trinkets, odds and ends. Cross-posted from r/drew off my chest. I ruined family game night by trying to be the funny guy. We were playing charades. My little cousin acted out something stupid. Arms flailing, rolling on the floor, and nobody could guess it. I, trying to be funny, shouted, "Drunk uncle at Thanksgiving!" Nobody laughs. Nobody. Dead silence. Then my actual uncle, who quit drinking, oh no! Then my actual uncle, who quit drinking 2 years ago, goes, "Really?" My cousin whispered, "It was supposed to be a penguin." And now I'm banned from making guesses unless it's my turn. Worst night of my life. Too long didn't read, tried to be funny during charades, accidentally roasted my recovering alcoholic uncle, and became the family villain. So, I've had members of my family battle with alcoholism and dealing with that, and going through whether it's rehab, therapy, or just cold turkeying it and dealing with the side effects. Hell, I had a family member who was so in deep that when they cold turkey cut it, they started having auditory hallucinations because of just how far gone they were, until they started picking themselves up and fighting for a future they could be proud of. So I've seen both sides of the coin here when it comes to recovery and where you come from and where you are. And if there are jokes that OP made about someone acting stupid, flailing their arms and rolling on the floor, and their first thought is drunk uncle, my only assumption is the uncle probably came from a really low point in his life and has done a lot to really put himself back together. So, yeah, that's a pretty fucked up joke to make, dude. If you still hold reservations about the way that he potentially may have treated you in the past or actions that he may have done, talk to him about that as an adult and actually just have a conversation about his previous actions so that way you two can reconcile and move forward from them. Making fun of him during a game of charades? Yeah, you kinda deserve to be the family villain there. Also, I am envious of the fact that a poorly made joke is the worst night of your life, and the only consequence you seem to have is that you're no longer allowed to make guesses unless it's your turn. I know that he's probably being hyperbolic with that comment, but that was something that popped in my head immediately when that was spoken of. That's the worst night of your life? Out of anything? That? Damn. I wish I was in your shoes for that one, man.
Hey, welcome to the outro. Don't forget this whole thing is basically brought to you by GamerSupps. If you like caffeine, then I can't recommend GamerSupps enough. Use code Oz at checkout to support the channel. And I do actually use this product. It's replaced all other sources of caffeine for me because I feel good. It doesn't have any of that extra stuff that a pre-workout blend might have. It's with a couple of the extra things to make it so you don't crash as hard. It's good. I like it. Personally, if you really want a good flavor, try the Soda Pressing Pear or even the Dragon Fruit Punch. Those two are my personal favorites right now.